I used what I think is one of the most precious foods out there, which is milk. Would you all agree? There's a lot of mothers that would say, hey, this is my aspiration. Food banks say this is the #1 demanded item. The mothers I met with actually would say we fill it up with water halfway through the week. We know that what this can do to a child from brain development to things you'll hear about in the panel, this is critical right here. Bless them. This also is one of the greatest food gaps we currently have. As you can see, we've doubled in the last 50 years milk. But per person, we have 14% less. So here's what these 3 glasses represent. These 3 glasses represent 8 ounces approximately each. 24 ounces is what you all consume on a daily basis. Europeans, Americans, first world. I know, like my family, that's mostly yogurt and pizza cheese. It isn't necessarily fruit or milk. Sorry, Chris. Okay, butter. Land O'Lakes up here. Now let me make a little bit of an example here, though. If I separate these, there's another story. There's what we have globally per person, which is 8 ounces. Are you with me? This is what we have. We consume 3. But around the world, if you split the milk up, it's 1 8-ounce glass per person. What is recommended? We'll have a dietitian up here in a little bit. What is recommended? Okay, and it is 2 glasses. So this is the gap that we currently have. Let me try to put a little light onto this. If you look and say, and we had an outside part of this paper, we had an outside group of people look at different proteins in the gaps by country, by protein group. What was interesting here is if we just stay the course out through the 9 billion people, we will, and keep to the 1 glass, we'll have 4.5 billion people with no access. So staying the course is not an option. And then you can say, but Jeff, do you really need 2? We don't need 2 glasses of milk. Well, there was a, I think, landmark research study done in Kenya. A lot of you have heard it cited. I think it was cited last year at the World Food Prize, where test scores were given with Kenya kids. I mean, well done research study. And it showed that when that study started, they did test scores. Well, those, if they stayed on their current diet, their test scores went down 10%. Then they supplemented, same amount of calories. It isn't just the calories, it's the quality of calories. So the kids got the same amount of calories, but in oils, they were 7% less on their test scores. And with milk, a milk supplemented diet, they had 28% better. And with meat, 45% better. I'm sorry, but the quality of calories do matter. The quality of the diet matters. Rice and beans alone is not our answer. And people that challenge back to say, we don't need 2 glasses of milk per person, I say is the wrong answer. We need 2 glasses of milk per person. And we've got 1. So that leads, of course, obviously when I was in Europe, is to say, well, what happens? Well, if we stay on the current course, as we are now, and just continue, we will need 40 million more dairy cows to make this happen. If we went and said, let's go organic across the board, we would need 75 million where we are, okay? So let's put this in context, okay? In terms of a dairy cow. A dairy cow globally will produce 32 of these glasses, 2 gallons. Here in the US, it's 7 gallons, so that's 3.5 times what you see up there. But globally, the global dairy cow produces 32. So the real question is, well then, how much more do we need? How much more would we need? Shockingly, we need, they even put a black line on the glass here for me. It's not to go over, we need this much, 4.75 ounces per cow per day. If that, we don't need the 40 million more dairy cows. Okay. Is that possible? Well, I looked and said, take a look at this. If that's our goal, 4.75, the top producing dairy countries, on average per year, are producing in the neighborhood of 14. So that would be, almost 4 times this. And that's happening naturally year by year. What's even more exciting to me is countries that are emerging, that a lot of companies around here that are working and helping innovate, is there's a lot of exciting things happening. And you look at places like East Europe and Ukraine and Portugal, these emerging top producing dairy, most improved, you can see they're doing 5 times that. And you say, what are they doing? As we double-clicked and studied that, You know what the first thing was? Fresh water. That's pretty innovative. But it's vaccinations, reproduction, spreading innovation around the world is possible. This right here fills the gap. This right here gives everybody 2 glasses. This right here improves test scores. And this right here makes us turn this 1.5 planets around. This is very doable. I'm very confident. So that's kind of a different way, different than music. That kind of puts it. What also it does is I think, hey, as a whole, it does say, as a whole, as you play this out to 2050, 66 million cows, the land mass of Alaska, the fresh water consumption annually of 3 major countries in Europe are examples. So that leads to, can we do this? And so let me just share what I believe is in the center of this vision and this circle is 70% plus of the solution is innovation. Doing it better, doing it different, from fresh water to reproduction to the next genetic platform that moves forward. The other 2 that I think are equally as important is choice and trade. Let me touch briefly on them and then we'll bring the panel up. The power of innovation, one thing we did in preparing this paper is went out and got 20 global experts that study this all the time, and we surveyed them and said, what are the most important things to have an impact? And what came back, you may not be able to read all this, but this report was released yesterday by the Center of Food Integrity, is if you look at kind of that top section, it's from smallholder farmers up to policies and technology. It is enabling the technology that currently already exists to be released and globalized around the world. That is the #1 solution from 20 independent experts from all over the world, from China, Europe, US, Brazil. The belief is that's what's most critical. That report will be assessed. Now let me get into an area that I'm very passionate about that I think is absolutely critical. Is we hear all the time, you know, what do our consumers really want though? We live, a lot of us, in what I would call the luxury segment of where money for food really doesn't matter, so we have an ability to choose more than we ever do. And I would just challenge us all right now to stop, because I think this is the most important graphic of everything. Our world has changed, and I believe our measures have to change. And I've seen a huge change in the last year since I was here in terms of how we can measure what consumers want. So anytime a consumer says, or someone says, I don't think the consumers want that, I would ask you now to say, time out, stop, let's talk about this. We used to have headlines in newspapers and CBS News articles. Now I believe we have media mentions, which not measures the monologue, it measures the dialogue. And I'll touch upon that in just a minute. The second is aided questions versus unaided questions. It's amazing how many studies are out there. Every year we survey every study on technology and meat, milk, and eggs done by anybody. 2/3 to 3/4 of them are aided questions. Do you want milk from a cow that was fed hormones, standing in a barn confined on its own manure for days, yes or no? If you're with me here, okay? If you can aid it to a yes or no. No, what's important to you when you buy dairy products? That's the unaided question that we're looking for. What do consumers really want? The third is, this is shocking to me, there's major retailers in the past that have measured their entire response by the call, inquiry, customer complaint line. Versus saying, give me the spend Kroger card or Publix card and tell me what people want. I challenge all of us when we hear someone say, I'm not sure that's what the consumer wants, we need to shift to the right because our world has shifted to the right.